Welcome back to Balmer's Workshop. It's always nice to have you here. Well, it's that time again. We've got another Pajero, however you say it, it rhymes with sombrero mini again. This is not the one you're used to seeing in the videos that I have produced thus far, but it is a very, very similar vehicle. It's a couple of years newer, which makes very little difference, but it does make some difference, as we'll get to later. And this vehicle has had most of the same accessories applied to it that I built for the one that you have seen in the videos, including this front bumper right here with the lower valence underneath, and with, I think the one you've seen had the high lift jack mounts on it and shackle mount recovery points, I believe, but I don't think it had a 2-inch receiver added to it. So that's the main difference on this front bumper. We'll go over that in just a minute here. It's also had some rock sliders added. Sorry if the lighting isn't very great. We'll get a better view of those in a little bit. These are fully round tube rock sliders, where on the other vehicle they are a square tube main rail with round tube rub rails. I have not done a video on that yet, I don't think, so stay tuned for that one, unless I'm wrong and I have produced that. But we'll go over exactly how those were built and how they were mounted to the vehicle in that video rather than this one. So again, stay tuned. I have also built a rear bumper for this vehicle, much like I did on the one that's in the videos, except that this is a non-swing away variant. It's got the receiver and the shackle mount recovery points, like I believe are on the other one, but just no swing away. This customer didn't feel the need for taking the load off of the door. It's not a huge tire, and he just didn't want to go with the swing away design. So that suits him, and the receiver is working well right now, as you can see, to support a bike rack. So a decent little clean setup. It increases the departure angle over stock slightly, and it just really cleans up the look of the vehicle, and it gives a nice solid step to stand on. If he was to add a roof rack to it and want to get up to that roof rack, then he could do so standing on the back of the bumper, and it just keeps things clean and tidy and looking good. There's possibly a better look at the rock slider. I think the lighting might be a little better on this side of the vehicle. And of course that does a fine job of protecting the rockers themselves, as well as the sides of the vehicle if he ever gets in a situation where he's rubbing up against a tree or a rock. And here is the front bumper. Now again, this one has a 2-inch receiver, which is not featured on the other one, I'm pretty sure. Normally when I put a receiver on a front bumper, I will recess it so that it just sticks out by a 1/4 inch, just enough for me to put a really nice weld bead around the front as well as the back, of course. But in this case, there's no room behind this bumper to recess that receiver into. It'd be going into the straight into the radiator, intercooler, whichever it is, I can't remember. So obviously we can't have that. So I had to have it protruding out the front, or the other option was to bring the whole bumper forward by about 3.5 inches, that looks like to me. And then we could have recessed the receiver, but that would have made a whole different design to the front bumper. It would have made the vehicle front end look a little clunkier and bigger. Customer didn't want that. I didn't think that would look particularly good either. So we decided to go with what we did go with, which was the protruding receiver. And he uses that for temporary winch mounting, as well as a license plate mount, which I have available, and he can use it for any other receiver mounted accessory, of course. We have replicated the valence as we did on the other bumper. This is just a cosmetic piece. It just covers up the sheet metal in behind there, keeps things looking clean, and we left the stock skid plate in place as we did on the one that's in the videos. Now on that one, the skid plate is the same design as this, and it's a really nice form-fitting design that covers everything it needs to cover, and it's kind of a complex shape in order to do that, and it's nice and tucked up tight. So it's a good skid plate in that sense. And on the one in the videos, we left that skid plate in place because it was thick enough and robust enough that I felt that it was going to stand up to most of the hits this vehicle would ever see. In this case, this vehicle is a couple years newer, and they went to a much thinner material on the skid plate. Give you a little look here on the side. I'm using one finger, by the way, and I mean that's That is some thin, flexible material. I think that's probably about 20 gauge stamp steel. So super, super flimsy, and it just needs a little more than that. So the job today is to design a Coroplast mock-up of a skid plate for this, and then turn that into a CAD design, send that over to the supplier, get it plasma cut out, and affix it to the vehicle, make sure it fits properly, then send it out for powder coating, and do the final install a little later. But today, again, we're going to try to get the design itself complete. It's not a big job. We should be able to do it all in a couple of hours, I would hope. All right, and we are up on the hoist and ready to have a better look at the stock skid plate. Now, I had said that this skid plate was exactly the same as the other one in terms of its the way that it's formed, but that it was thinner. I was wrong. It's not the same as the other one in the way that it's formed, in that it's actually a lot flatter. As you can see, this one's got a virtually flat profile to it, where the other one, if I remember correctly, and I'm almost positive I'm right, really tucked up in behind these, I think these are called tension rods, this part of the suspension, but there's a mount for them right here. And the earlier version skid plate tucked right up in behind there and gave a little more clearance than this one does. And that's kind of what I want to replicate when I make the new one, is I want to give them as much clearance in the center of the vehicle as I possibly can. And so I actually, the last time that this vehicle was in, I started a mock-up of the skid plate, but I ran out of time. So I've got something over on the bench that I'm going to show you in a few minutes once I remove this guy, which should allow us to do exactly what I just mentioned and have a better clearance in the center than we do at the outsides, just you know, in case there's an obstacle where that kind of clearance is necessary or works to an advantage. I'm going to do my very best to protect the mounts for those tension rods, if they're called tension rods, I hope that's right, so that they're well protected, because that's kind of a vulnerable area. We'll have the new skid plate tucked right up in here, just like this one does, so everything still looks nice and clean. And then maybe we'll throw the logo into it as well, if it looks like you could see it. We'll have a look at that in just a moment once I remove this stock skid plate, which I think is just a few bolts. A couple tucked way up in here on each side, of course, and these guys there, and I think that's it. So we'll pull this off real quick, and then we'll have a better look at what lies underneath it. And we'll have a little look at the template that I've already made, or the mock-up rather, that I've already made. And here we are with the skid plate removed. So you can see these mounts that I was talking about. These are tension rods, trailing arms, whatever you want to call them. But these mounts obviously are where these are positioned, and so we want to protect these at all costs. And then we want to try to give a little bit more clearance in here if we reasonably can. It may not be that effective, but I think it's, you know, I'd rather try to give them as much clearance as I can rather than just make the job simpler for myself. Now, when I'm creating pretty much any new part, the first thing I look for is decent mounting spots. Now, if there's factory holes in the frame, or unibody in this case, I try to use those. This one looks like it's in a decent location. We've got a central hole, and I was hoping there'd be another symmetrical matching one over here. However, obviously there is not. I don't want to use an asymmetrical setup. I'd like to go to these outsides potentially. So what I'm going to do, probably, I haven't completely decided this yet, but what I'm probably going to do is use this location, and then I will drill a hole in the same location over here so that we've got symmetrical mounts. And then we'll put some riv nuts or threaded fastener, threaded rivets into there. We probably will use the center one as well, and that'll be our front mounts. And from there, the skid plate can wrap down and probably go to the stock locations underneath here. Now, I said that I've started a mock-up. I have. I'll go grab that now, and we'll have a quick look at it. So this is the mock-up. It's made out of Coroplast, which is a corrugated plastic product, similar to corrugated cardboard, but plastic. I always use this for my mock-ups because when you make cuts, it's easier to get a really nice straight cut, and the material holds its dimensions better than cardboard does. So that's why I use this instead of cardboard. It's not terribly expensive either. So I had done this the last time the vehicle was in. Obviously, I've got a center line, which I can match up here, and then we can create the angle that we're after and go as tight as we possibly can. Now you can see when I go nice and tight, I can actually go just as deep as these mounts here and leave all this protruding. And then I've designed these flaps so that they'll come down something like this. That's as far as I got with my design at that point. I just ran out of time. But the idea was that these would come down in some fashion, probably something like that. Then I'll cut them back along a line like that and plate the section in there so that we get a nice formed kind of a pocket for that mount. And obviously the same thing back here. But again, that's as far as I had gotten. So what I want to do is figure out how much of this material I actually need. The way I'm going to figure that out is by marking the position of this mount onto here and then giving myself probably like 1.5 inches or 2 inches past that. And I'll create like a nice rounded end to it or something that looks half decent. We'll get this guy mounted up. We'll add riv nuts into, or threaded rivets into here and into the hole that I'll drill on the other side. I think we'll use 3/8 for those, or maybe we'll even go to metric because this is a metric vehicle. Maybe we'll stick with metric. I'm not sure yet. Depends what I have in terms of hardware kicking around. But once that's mounted, then we've got something to really work with where we can figure out what angle we want here, what angles we want here, how far back we want to trim all this stuff, and so forth. And obviously as well, I'll add another piece that's going to go underneath this cross member, and we can secure that too once we're happy with the positioning. So let's get started with all that business. All right, so I've inserted my threaded rivets and I marked out my positions. And now I'd like to start working on figuring out these the protection for these mounts. But I think reasonably what I need to do is secure this plate into position at the angle that I want it to be. So I'm going to do that next. We'll lift the vehicle a little higher and I'll see how tight I can reasonably get with this. And then we'll add a piece underneath the bottom there and hook into the other cross member. All right, so now that we're up on the hoist a little higher and we can see what kind of angles we can deal with here, this is about as tight as I can go, and I'm actually a little deeper than these mounts. So that's not going to work in terms of the way that I've started to do these, because of course as I try to angle these out, you know, to any reasonable degree, they just hit right here. So I just wanted to show you how you can go too far on your angle. Otherwise this would be really good, because if you look from up in here, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there's about a 1/2 inch gap in here between the cross member and what will be the skid plate. And that's about what I'd like as a bare minimum. And you don't ever want it to touch the skid plate, the cross member at the bend point. You want it to touch the cross member at the mounts. So so that's as tight as I would ever want to run it. But because of the interference here at the mounts, I'm going to use a slightly more shallow angle. Now I've used a stand here, an adjustable stand, just to hold my skid plate in place. And because it's on an angle, all I have to do is pull that stand forward to very gradually adjust that angle. I'll hold you back here a little bit so that you can see what I'm doing. Hopefully you can see this. So I'll just bring it forward until I'm happy that it's at about the same angle as these mounts. So now I've got some leeway here. Still very, very tight up in this corner, but we're getting close to where I'd like to be. And we've got better angle definitely than the stock skid plate. If we look from the side, it's considerably steeper than the stock one was, and then we just have to figure out how to protect these mounts here. So I'm pretty happy with that. I might go with a little less steep of an angle yet, just to guarantee that I don't have any issues around here, but that's about it. So what I'll do now is I'll put an angle finder here or a protractor here, record that angle, and mark it on the skid plate. And the angle is 59.5, 60 degrees, let's say. But if I want to back it off just that little bit more, which I think I do, let's just bring that a little further back to about there, I would say. That seems more comfortable to me. Then we've reduced our angle to 57 degrees. So I will mark that on here. 57 degrees is that angle, and you mark an angle with a little diamond over the pieces for a bend. Now this is a 57-degree angle according to this guy, but really it's the inverse of that. So the inverse of 57 is, what is 180 minus 57? 123, is that right? Yeah, 123. So we'll go 57, 123 degrees, because when I bring this, when I get this plasma cut and when I do my CAD design, I want to make a notation for a bend at 123 degrees on there for my supplier rather than 57, because that's what they're going to see it as. When a piece starts out, it's considered to be flat at 180 degrees, and once you start pulling an end up, you start subtracting from that 180 degrees. So it would have been 180 being flat, push it up to there to get to 123. Okay, so now we are on the underside or backside of the skid plate, and the skid plate is still in position where I want it to be in terms of getting that angle correct. I'm sorry about the light over there, but that's as high as I can get the camera, so there's nothing I can do about it. But anyway, right here are my mounts that I'm going to be using to mount the skid plate to underneath. Those are stock mounts. And what I want to do now is project forward from there, just on a level plane, to the skid plate so that I know where I want to put my bend. What I did is I just cut a piece of flat bar to the right length, popped it up inside here flat on the mount, and then I just marked with a pen at the point that I wanted to make my bend. And then I did obviously the same over here on this side. So pretty rudimentary, but it's going to work for me, I think. So we've got a decent line there. What I'll do once I pull the skid plate off is just double check with a square or tape measure to make sure that the distance is the same on them. If not, I'll probably take an average of them, and then I'll make a cut on this, and we'll put an angle on the skid plate so that we can get back to these mounts and figure out exactly what angle we need that to be. When you're making cuts on your Coroplast, obviously it's always important to use a straight edge, but unlike I've done here, it's a really good idea to clamp that straight edge down to your work surface. Usually I just use a piece of plywood on some stands, so I've got just a thin edge, and I can clamp a spring clamp onto it really quickly and easily just to make sure that I don't have my straight edge shifting while I'm cutting. But I've got enough practice at this that I'm pretty good at it, and I haven't had an issue here. In this case, all I was doing was scoring the material so that I can put a bend in it. So what I do is I just run the knife through the first layer of plastic until I can feel that I'm into all these ribs. Obviously take my straight edge away, and I can just force it over that bend and break those ribs. And now I've got a very, very clean bend that I can adjust. So I'll put this up into position again, get my angle correct in terms of right here. So I'll go to that 123 degree angle, or 57 if you want to call it that. And then we'll just bring this up to a 0 degree angle so that we're flat with those mounts. And we'll cut whatever a profile we need to in here so that it clears everything that it needs to clear and contacts what it needs to contact. So there you are. Back on the vehicle. And the bend has worked out to be in pretty well the right place. If I bring this guy up, we've got almost a dead flat angle to contact those mounts. And as I referred to at the bench, I've just got too much material back in here now. So I'm gonna basically, here, I'll just push the stand forward to get the plate out of the way. I'm gonna remove everything that doesn't need to be there. So I'll come back into the mount position here, and then I'll come forward in front of these ribs so that we've got a nice flat mating surface, and same on this side. So I'll take a few minutes to work with that. All right, back on once again, and I've trimmed this out. I've put some nice radiuses on there. That's an 8-inch diameter that I used for that. And then I notched out where I felt I needed to get this to fit into place, and it fits in really nicely. There's no more interference with any of these little ribs or anything like that. It fits up nice and flat. The center line is perfectly centered to the vehicle, so I'm really happy with that. And I've got lines marked in line with my bolt holes, as you can see right there. Now I just have to mark the depth of them, so I'll just measure forward from this face to the center of the bolt hole and do the same on the skid plate. The only issue is, and it is an issue, is that basically my angle was a little bit off. So I've got about a 1/2 inch gap between my skid plate and the cross member. If you can see that, I don't know if the lighting's good enough. But in order to get rid of that gap, what I'm gonna do is I'm simply going to complete the cut on this line rather than having it as a score. I'll just cut it completely off, We'll mount this bottom piece, and then we'll basically draw a line again where they intersect. I'll cut out that section, which is going to be about 1/2 an inch, and then we'll tape it together. Always nicer when you don't have to tape them together, like this one right here has been scored and it's still complete on the one side. So that way when you set an angle, it kind of holds that angle nicely for you. Whereas if you look at this side, as an example where I've got tape, it just is floppy. But you can still get the angle you want and then secure it into position. So that's what we're going to do back here by mounting this piece to the vehicle first. That'll secure it into position. We'll cut that, bring it up into place and just tape it, and then record our angle, and away we go. And there we are. The skid plate has been cut in twain. And what I did to figure out where I wanted to mark my, or to cut my next line, was I just went with a square off of that edge. This is out of position now, but basically that lined up. Once I had it sitting where it was supposed to sit, that would line up with the bottom plate. And so therefore we'll just cut along, or sorry, we won't cut along that line. We'll score the backside and put a bend right there. And then we'll tape the joint flat, and that should all made up properly, because we shouldn't reasonably have lost any material in here. We'll use the same amount of material, we'll just put the bend in a different spot. So we won't actually remove anything from here, we'll just score it, bend it, and tape it together. So I feel like I didn't explain myself very well in that last clip, and so I will show you what I meant. Here's that score line that I was talking about. I have created that, and that allows me to just push this bend further forward. So basically, in essence, I'm adding material to this flat portion here. I thought I was going to go 1/2 inch. I actually went 7/8. And the reason being is just to give myself a little extra margin to clear here, because of course when I push this further forward, it reduces the angle of the skid plate. So it'll clear this mount a little bit more, giving it the 7/8 of an inch, but you can see no material was lost. It makes up perfectly because all I did effectively was push that bend forward. So now I'll tape this joint back together flat, and then we've got still the exact right angles that we want, and we haven't had to cut away and add material. It was a very, very simple fix just to score that line further ahead and change the location of the bend itself. So there you are. I've lowered the vehicle down a little bit to make it easier to work with these, let's call them wings. They're kind of wing-like with these wings. And I have the one that has the score and the one that has the tape, as mentioned earlier. And this one is sitting with just the perfect amount of clearance away from this mount right now. So again, it's a very good product in that sense, where you can kind of position it and it will hold that for you. So that's an excellent thing to work with. What I've done so far is I've taken a square, this fits better this way, and just gone straight down from the bulkhead, the cross member here, and made a mark where it intersects with the skid plate, so that I know that if I was to connect the dot between there and up here and cut this piece off, I've got a perfectly flat face, and then I can create a piece to fit in here, and I've got that perfectly flat face. Now, I don't know that I want it to be dead flat. I might actually want it to angle back a little bit. I think that might look a little cooler. And just by eye, when I put the square in place, that kind of looks good to me. So this square is 1 inch wide. So if I go 1 inch further back than that point, and again connect the dot to there and cut that off, I think that'll look pretty cool. And then we'll put an angled piece in here. Like I explained earlier, we'll connect it into that bolt hole as well. And I think that'll look really good. And then down here, we'll just kind of fair it in so we've got a flat bottom to it or something like that. We'll work with that in a little while. But because I have this one that's scored and bends into a really nice angle, like I mentioned, and this one that is loose, what I'm going to do, excuse me, is remove this one and mimic those or copy those marks onto it, cut this and put it back in place so that I can do my experimenting much more easily that way. So just kind of handy. All right, time to jump ahead a little bit with this video. As you can see, I've got the skid plate itself made up in steel now. I sent this out to my supplier. I drew it out on the CAD program like I said I would, and sent that out for cutting and forming. And I added my logo in here as I normally do. And I've given myself those ears off of this side like we had on the mock-up so that I can add in my covers for these tension rods. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here for part 1 in this 2-part series. Thanks for joining me for another episode. Please come back soon for the final chapter where we'll design and produce those tension rod protectors and get this piece powder coated and installed. Thanks again for watching until the end. A big thumbs up to you for that. Take care of you and your loved ones. We'll see you back here in the shop very soon.